안녕하세요.
The wind blew gently across the rooftop of the building, where Ye-jin and Young-hwan now stood face to face. The silence between them spoke louder than any words ever could. Below them, the city shimmered, oblivious to the emotional battle unfolding at that moment. The lights flickered like urban stars, mirroring the uncertainty that lingered between them. "So this is it," Ye-jin murmured, her gaze lost in the view before her. "After everything, we're back where it all began." Young-hwan took a step toward her, hesitant but determined. His eyes searched hers, looking for a spark of hope hidden behind her fear. "It doesn't have to be the end, Ye-jin. We can start over." She smiled, but there was sadness in that smile, a reflection of lost time, of wounds that still bled even though they couldn't be seen. The past couldn't be erased, but could it be rewritten? "I spent years believing that leaving you was the best decision for both of us. But what if I was wrong? What if there's still something left to save?" Jung-hwan held his breath, feeling hope battle against the fear of disappointment. He reached out his hand toward her, not forcing, just offering. "Maybe we can't erase the past, but we can write a new future. You just have to want it." Ye-jin's eyes filled with unshed tears. Her heart screamed for him, but her mind still hesitated. There were so many barriers between them, yet there was also a love that had never truly faded. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, she smiled softly, but this time with renewed strength. "I want to try," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, yet heavy with emotion, "but I can't promise it will be easy." Young-hwan smiled, feeling a deep sense of relief. For the first time in years, he saw a real chance for a new beginning. Nothing worth having is ever easy. They looked at each other for a long moment, before Ye-jin finally reached for his hand. The wind blew stronger, as if sealing their decision, carrying the past away, and leaving behind only the promise of something new. Below them, the city continued to glow, a silent witness to a love that, against all odds, had found a second chance. Later that night, as they walked together through the quiet streets of Seoul, Ye-jin felt the warmth of Jung-hwan's presence beside her. No words were needed at that moment. Their hearts were in sync, playing a silent melody only they could hear. He glanced at her, and for the first time in a long while, he saw the same girl who had once enchanted him years ago. But he also saw a stronger woman, one who carried the scars of the past, yet refused to let them define her future. "Do you think we can really make this work?" Ye-jin asked, breaking the silence. Jung-hwan stopped and turned to her, the soft glow of the streetlights illuminating their faces. "There's only one way to find out." And there, beneath the vast Seoul night sky, they decided that the past didn't have to be a burden. It could be a reminder that some stories deserve a second chance. The night was cold in Seoul, and the neon signs cast their glow over the bustling streets. Sung-woo walked briskly, pulling his coat tighter over his shoulders. He no longer belonged to this world, to the past he had fought so hard to bury. And yet, something about this night made him stop. Amidst the crowd, a familiar figure. Jisoo was there, sitting in a small cafe, absent-mindedly flipping through a notebook. Time had seemingly not touched her. The same soft glow in her eyes, the same serene expression, but something about her face suggested that life had not been entirely kind to her either. Sung-woo hesitated. Why now? After all these years, after so much effort to erase who he once was, fate seemed to be laughing at him. But unable to resist, he stepped inside the cafe. The small bell above the door jingled softly, and Jisoo lifted her gaze. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, time stood still. Sung-woo? The surprise in her voice was palpable. He tried to smile, but something tightened in his throat. "Jisoo, it's been a long time." She blinked a few times, as if trying to process his presence. The cafe was warm and inviting, yet the air between them was electric, heavy with an unfinished past. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said, slowly closing the notebook. "Neither did I," he admitted truthfully. Silence fell between them, full of unspoken questions. Jisoo took a deep breath, as if debating whether to ask what she really wanted to know. But Sung-woo was quicker. "You're still here," his voice was low, almost a whisper. She nodded, a faint, joyless smile forming on her lips. Not everyone gets to run away from who they are, Sung-woo. The weight of her words crashed over him like a storm. He knew that this reunion was no mere coincidence, and he also knew that his lie, his carefully built facade, would soon unravel. Jisoo averted her gaze, watching as the steam from her tea dissipated into the air, much like the memories she had tried to bury. "How have you been?" Sung-woo finally found the courage to break the heavy silence between them. She smiled, but it was empty, a shadow of what they once were. "Better than I expected. Worse than I'd like." He recognized the pain behind her words. He felt it too. "Jisoo, Before he could continue, the cafe door swung open again, sending a gust of cold air through the room. A man walked in, smiling at Jisoo. She smiled back, but not with the same warmth. Sung-woo felt a sharp pang in his chest. Was he too late? Jisoo's heart raced as she stared at Sung-woo, still struggling to process his presence there. The man beside her, Min-jun, sensed the tension in the air and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Sung-woo noticed the gesture and looked away, an inexplicable discomfort settling within him. "Are you okay, Jisoo?" Min-jun asked, his voice gentle but laced with concern. Jisoo nodded, forcing a smile. "I am just surprised." She looked at Sung-woo, trying to gauge his reaction. "I didn't expect to see you here." Sung-woo adjusted his coat, as if trying to conceal his unease. "Neither did I, but it seems fate enjoys playing games with us." Min-jun glanced between Jisoo and Sung-woo, sensing that he was an outsider in whatever history lay between them. "You two know each other?" he asked, attempting to diffuse the tension. Jisoo hesitated, but her voice was steady when she replied, "Yes, we were friends a long time ago." Sung-woo let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "Friends? Is that how you saw us, Jisoo?" She bit her lip, looking away. The past she had tried so hard to leave behind was catching up to her faster than she had anticipated. Min-jun, perceptive as ever, noticed the weight of the moment and, in a subtle move, lightly squeezed Jisoo's hand on the table. "I think I'll grab something to drink. Excuse me?" Min-jun said, rising from his seat to give them space. Now, the tension between Sung-woo and Jisoo was palpable. He studied her carefully, as if trying to see past the mask she wore. "You don't have to pretend, Jisoo. I know you avoided me all these years." She took a deep breath, finally summoning the courage to face this ghost from her past. "I didn't have a choice, Sung-woo. You disappeared and came back as if nothing had happened. How do you expect me to react?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "I disappeared because I had to. I did what I thought was best for both of us." Jisoo let out a bitter laugh. "And who told you that was what was best for me?" A heavy silence settled between them. They both knew there was much more beneath their words. Min-jun returned with a tray, unintentionally cutting through the tension. "I hope you two didn't start fighting while I was gone," he joked, attempting to lighten the mood. Sung-woo smiled, but his gaze remained locked on Jisoo. "Not yet, Min-jun, but some stories don't stay buried so easily." Jisoo shivered slightly. The past was more alive than ever, and this unexpected reunion was bound to change everything. Min-jun, ever observant, took a sip of his coffee before glancing at Jisoo with a slight furrow in his brow. "I can wait for you outside if you want to talk to him." Jisoo blinked, surprised by Min-jun's understanding. He wasn't jealous or angry, just respectful. She nodded in appreciation and watched as he walked toward the exit, leaving her alone with Sung-woo. "He seems like a good man," Sung-woo remarked, crossing his arms. "He is," Jisoo replied simply. A tightness formed in Sung-woo's chest. He had no right to feel uneasy about this, yet he did. "If you found someone who makes you happy, then why are you still sitting here talking to me?" he asked, more to provoke her than out of genuine curiosity. Jisoo let out a small, humorless chuckle. "Because after all these years, you suddenly showed up. Because despite everything, I need to understand. Why did you really leave, Sung-woo?" He remained silent for a moment before lowering his gaze. "I was afraid. Afraid of not being enough. Afraid that I'd never be able to give you the life you deserved." Jisoo felt her chest tighten. "You never even asked me what I wanted." Sung-woo exhaled slowly. I know. He met her gaze with sincerity, and I regret that every single day. The cafe suddenly felt smaller, suffocating under the weight of their past. Jisoo turned toward the door where Min-jun waited patiently. She had to make a decision. Was the past worth reliving? Or was it finally time to leave it behind? The days following Jisoo and Sung-woo's unexpected reunion were a whirlwind of confusion and repressed emotions. Neither of them wanted to admit it, but that encounter had awakened something they thought had long been buried. Jisoo tried to carry on with her routine alongside Min-jun, the gentle and patient man who had always understood her, while Sung-woo buried himself in work, yet found himself unable to shake the memory of her. Fate, however, seemed determined to play its tricks on them. A charity gala organized by Min-jun's company once again brought Jisoo and Sung-woo into the same space. She wore an elegant gown, but inside, she felt out of place. She knew she was surrounded by high society, a world Sung-woo had always known well, but that had always seemed unattainable to her. Sung-woo, on the other hand, wore his perfectly tailored suit, blending effortlessly into the sophisticated environment. His eyes found Jisoo the moment she entered the ballroom, and for a brief moment, time seemed to freeze. Min-jun, standing beside her, noticed the tension in the air and instinctively held her hand in a protective gesture, pulling her back to reality. Throughout the evening, they avoided each other, but their presence was impossible to ignore. Fleeting glances were exchanged. Subtle gestures betrayed the growing tension. In the middle of the event, one of the investors approached Jisoo, asking pointed questions about her relationship with Min-jun. His tone was inquisitive, as if questioning whether she truly belonged in that world. Before Jisoo could answer, Sung-woo intervened. Jisoo has more class and intelligence than anyone in this room. Perhaps you should think twice before asking such questions. His voice was calm, but there was an undeniable challenge in his words. The investor backed away, visibly unsettled. Jisoo turned to Sung-woo with a mixture of surprise and irritation. As soon as they had a moment alone, she confronted him. "You didn't have to do that, Sung-woo. I can defend myself." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I know, but I couldn't stand by and watch someone treat you as if you don't belong here." Jisoo lowered her gaze. "Because I don't belong, Sung-woo, and you know that." He lightly traced the rim of his glass, as if carefully choosing his next words. "You belong wherever you want to be. Don't let others decide that for you." Before she could respond, Min-jun approached, asking if everything was all right. Jisoo forced a smile and nodded, but inside, something was unraveling. The night carried on, with guests toasting, dancing, and exchanging polite conversations. But Jisoo's mind was elsewhere. Min-jun sensed her unease and gently pulled her aside to a more private corner. "Jisoo, what's wrong?" he asked, holding her hands. She took a deep breath before answering. "Nothing. I just don't feel comfortable here." Min-jun studied her for a moment before nodding. "If you want to leave, just let me know." Meanwhile, Sung-woo found himself equally distracted. He stepped out onto the ballroom's balcony, hoping the fresh air would clear his thoughts. But his effort was in vain when he saw Jisoo approaching. She stopped beside him, saying nothing. Only the cool night wind filled the silence between them. "Why are you still here?" Sung-woo asked, his voice quieter than usual. Jisoo looked at him, her eyes filled with emotion. "Because, despite everything, there's still something I need to understand." He turned to fully face her. "Then ask me. I'm here." She hesitated, but knew she couldn't run from this any longer. "If you always belonged to this world, why did you make me believe that we could ever work?" Sung-woo sighed, feeling the weight of her question. "Because at that moment, I wanted to believe it just as much as you did." The silence that followed was louder than any response he could have given. They both knew the past still haunted them, and that there was no simple answer. Jisoo glanced inside the ballroom, where Min-jun was smiling, greeting guests with his usual grace and confidence. She knew he was a good man. So why was it Sung-woo who made her heart waver? Sung-woo noticed her hesitation and pressed his lips together. "Don't hurt yourself trying to live for others, Jisoo." Before she could reply, he turned and walked away, leaving her alone on the balcony. Jisoo felt the cold wind against her skin, but she wasn't sure if the chill came from the night breeze or from the confusion that now consumed her heart. The days following the event were filled with unease for Jisoo. She tried to continue her routine alongside Minjun, but her mind kept replaying the moments she had shared with Sungwoo. Every exchanged word, every gaze heavy with emotion, echoed back relentlessly. Her feelings were torn between the security of a stable future and the intense emotions that Sungwoo still stirred within her. One evening, as Jisoo was organizing some documents in Minjun's office, she came across a folder with Sungwoo's name on it. Her heart pounded. Something inside her urged her to open it, despite knowing she might regret it. Inside, she found detailed reports on Sungwoo, financial transactions, business connections, and most shockingly, a contract signed by her father in the past. The documents indicated that Sungwoo's rise to success had not been as natural as she had believed. Her father's name appeared in multiple agreements that had propelled Sungwoo's career, making it clear that he had played a role in shaping his fate. Dazed, Jisoo grabbed her phone and without thinking dialed Sungwoo's number. "Can you come here?" Her voice was restrained but laden with emotion. Minutes later, Sungwoo arrived. He found her standing by the desk, gripping the documents with trembling hands. "What does this mean?" Jisoo demanded, holding up the papers before him. Sungwoo glanced at the documents and closed his eyes briefly, as if he had already known this moment would come. "I can explain, Jisoo." "Explain? Then do it. Because from what I see here, everything you achieved was manipulated by my father. Did you know about this the whole time?" He let out a heavy sigh before answering. "I found out after I was already too deep into it. I never wanted to accept it, but if I refused, everything I had built would have collapsed." Jisoo felt a sharp pain in her chest. So everything was a lie? Even what we felt for each other? Sungwoo took a step closer, but she instinctively stepped back. "Never." His voice was firm. "What I felt for you was always real, but I didn't know how to tell you the truth without losing you." She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of tears threatening to fall. "I don't know if I can forgive this, Sungwoo." He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at her, holding on to the silent hope that there was still a chance. Jisoo moved away from him, sitting on the edge of the sofa, struggling to process everything. Minjun entered the office shortly after, immediately sensing the tension in the air. He glanced from Jisoo to Sungwoo, his expression hardening. "What's going on here?" Minjun's voice was laced with concern. Jisoo looked at him, then back at Sungwoo, feeling suffocated. The truth was now out in the open, and for the first time, she found herself trapped between two irreconcilable realities. Sungwoo took a deep breath before meeting Minjun's gaze. "I suppose this all makes sense to you now, doesn't it?" His voice was restrained but carried a heavy weight. Minjun furrowed his brow and turned to Jisoo. "You trusted him, Jisoo. And now?" Jisoo's heart pounded in her chest. The choices she had to make had never felt more impossible. The night in Seoul was restless, mirroring the storm raging within Jisoo. After the revelation about the connection between her father and Sungwoo, her heart was torn. Minjun had tried to comfort her, but she knew that only one person could give her the answers she truly needed. The next day, Jisoo went to meet Sungwoo. He was sitting on a park bench, the same park where they used to meet in the past. As soon as he saw her approaching, he stood up, his expression cautious yet filled with hope. "You came," he murmured. Jisoo nodded, crossing her arms. "I need to understand something, Sungwoo. When did you find out about my father? When did you realize he was behind your success?" He lowered his gaze before responding. "At first, I didn't know. But by the time I realized it, it was too late. If I had told you the truth, I would have lost everything I had built, including you." She took a deep breath, her mind battling against her heart. "And what would have happened if I had never found out? Would you have continued this lie forever?" Sungwoo stepped closer but maintained a respectful distance between them. "It was never a lie, Jisoo. What we felt for each other was always real. But I was afraid that the truth would drive us apart." She averted her gaze, fighting back the tears threatening to spill. The cold night wind passed between them, carrying the weight of unspoken words. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Sungwoo." but I also don't know if I can move forward without at least trying to understand what I still feel. He took another step closer, his eyes filled with emotion. I will wait, Jisoo, for as long as it takes, but I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you. Her hesitation was evident, but something inside her kept her from walking away completely. Minutes passed in silence, but Sung-woo knew he had to say more. I spent years trying to be worthy of you, Jisoo. When I found out your father was involved, I fought against it. I tried to cut all ties, but the consequences were too great. I would have lost everything, even the chance to see you again. She looked at him, absorbing every word. Then why didn't you ever tell me? Why did you let me believe everything between us was real without me knowing the truth? Sung-woo ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his features. Because I was a coward. I knew that the moment you found out, your opinion of me would change, and I couldn't bear to lose you. Jisoo met his gaze, her heart in turmoil. Part of her wanted to believe him, part of her wanted to run, but then she remembered all they had shared at the time. Sung-woo had been her safe haven. I need time, she whispered. Sung-woo nodded, holding on to hope. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. In that moment, she realized that her fate was still unwritten. The past had once separated them, but maybe, just maybe, the future could offer them a second chance. As Jisoo walked away, Min-jun was waiting for her on the other side of the street. He had watched the scene unfold, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew that no matter what happened next, his relationship with Jisoo would never be the same again.